everybody. My name is Shadley Gray. I'm with Agency Management Institute. Very excited to have you all join us today. I'm especially excited to talk to Robert because I'm a huge AI nerd at this point. I do a lot of reading about it. I'm actually writing a book about it. It's obviously a topic that's at the forefront of everyone's thinking right now with the amount of disruption it's doing. And I'm just very curious to hear your take on things, Robert. I will let Robert introduce himself and then I will turn over the presentation to him. He's gonna talk for a bit and then we will have a Q&A at the end. But if any time throughout the presentation, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat room and we will try and get them addressed as we go. Um, all right, so yeah. Hi, Robert.
Hi, how are you? Glad to see you. Glad to see everybody. It's always a fun time to do an AMI event because, well, I'm a huge fan and have been for a number of years. A huge fan. So, and you are my people. I am an agency myself, so it's this is all a wonderful experience for me. So thank you everybody for joining this. This is yeah, this what we're not going to cover today at all is really, prompt engineering or anything like that. The whole AI thing, I mean, it's been what, maybe 10 minutes since we've actually talked about AI. So I think, yeah, let's talk about AI some more. But really, what I want to do is I want to sort of level set on where, as agencies, we are in this, and specifically around how do we position ourselves these days? Because I know that's a hot topic. And I know for many of you, if you were like me, the last couple of years have just kind of sucked, to be honest with you, in terms of new business and challenges and all those kinds of things. So I want to talk a little bit about a reframing of the agency world in a world driven by AI where everybody knows everything. And so, yeah, now what? So let's dive in here. As Shelley said, I'll speak for maybe 25, 30 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time for some Q&A on the backside of things. So let's rewind a few years, right? So there was a time not that long ago when we agencies, we got invited into the rooms simply because like we knew stuff others didn't. We had insights, we had secret sauce. So the PDF everybody else couldn't get their hands on yet. We had information. We were the gatekeepers of good marketing wisdom. And that gate basically it had that velvet rope. There was a bouncer, maybe even a secret handshake or two. And so this is really, when we think about it, a descriptor for leadership more generally. So for centuries, really, leadership, and if we even think about that and extend it to thought leadership, has built on two key advantages. One was what was called an asymmetry of information. In other words, we had more information, leaders had more information than the others that were followers. And two, the ability to craft that asymmetry information into a visionary narrative or a compelling story, one that would inspire people to follow. And those who had led in business or politics or warfare, they did so in part because they had the access to knowledge that others didn't, better intelligence, sharper insights, exclusive information, created those opportunities for that power. And leadership relied on knowing more than anybody else and being able to communicate that in that compelling story in a way that made people want to follow. And thought leadership in business, honestly, has followed this same idea, leveraging asymmetric access to information, taking basically what a few knew, shaping it into an approachable, persuasive argument, using it to educate, to engage, to rally people toward a shared goal, which, if we're honest, was pretty much always going to be us or the sale of our services or the things that we could do for clients that nobody else could do. But then what happens now when kind of everybody knows everything? Well, it's an interesting challenge that we have now. So, if you think about it, and I know this is a bit hyperbole, but basically, any 22-year-old with Wi Fi and a decent caffeine tolerance could really prompt any AI tool to spin up a full marketing strategy in 30 seconds. And we could talk about how good that is and all of that. And maybe it's terrible. Maybe it's even decent. Maybe sometimes it's an even breakthrough idea, which is honestly mildly horrifying at the term. But we hear this every day. We hear from all the pundits out there. So today's AI is the dumbest you'll ever use. And we laughed 3 months ago about six-fingered people and doors that don't go anywhere and impossible physics and imagery. And AI can't spell. And well, here we are 3 months later, and kind of it can now. The imagery is better, the video is better. And tomorrow, well, we're going to basically be in this really interesting gap. The thing that made thought leadership a career path, the idea, the asymmetry of information, that is shrinking faster than our reach on an organic Instagram. So AI is basically eroding this idea of the asymmetry of information as a component of leadership. The idea that not or knowing something that others didn't, that used to be enough. And honestly, it's not anymore. Now, of course, real leadership was never just about like being able to have more facts or hoarding facts or anything like that. That second piece, that ability for us to charm and create a thought leadership or a narrative or a powerful argument or something is engaging was just as important. You had to shape facts and data information into something, or as Charles Cooper once said, and I love this, access to exclusive knowledge was once the key to influence, but that was never the point. The real foundation of thought leadership has always been about having something to say. But I would also add, yeah, it's always been about having something to say, but more importantly, said in a way that changed people's belief. In other words, that's the storyteller. And I talk a lot about storyteller. So here we are. Now we know. It's not about knowing more anymore because that access to knowledge is there. It's about thinking more clearly. It's about being able to recognize what good looks like, having taste, discernment, the ability to synthesize lots of things together. These are the arguments to where we be against AI these days. We can connect the dots faster. We can offer bold, human, nuanced perspective, creative perspective that the machines can't quite replicate yet. So AI can analyze, it can work on what that worked last quarter, it can help us be faster, but it can't feel why that campaign almost worked. That kind of worked. That weird low budget TikTok ad that sort of engaged people. That's a really critical distinction when you think about it, right? In marketing, kind of working is really important because it might be that kind of working thing where we can observe that it almost worked. That might be the inspiration to that piece of creative that made a million people cry. So, no, the fact that AI can generate content doesn't make us irrelevant, but it does absolutely
Sure,
raise the
does.
bar. And so where does that leave us now? Like where does that leave us? Well, if anybody can access the same insights, and this is leadership more broadly speaking, and when ultimately every decision can be optimized, stress tested by these agentic algorithms, and when execution of those tasks are handled by autonomous systems, you've all heard the sort of annoying thing about vibe marketing these days and all of that. Well, the question becomes like, what's left? Like, is it just charisma? Is it just our ability to be charming in the room? Well, if we play this out, so AI-driven knowledge being, sort of removing the asymmetry there, it seems to suggest that there are sort of two competing outcomes for where we end up. One becomes we sort of develop this greater consensus model, right? So if everybody sees the same reliable information and trusted information, we might, as a culture, begin to converge on shared truths. We might allow reason, evidence to guide decisions. This outcome would require a critically minded society that can basically separate all that credible, wonderful information from all the unreliable sources. Or we might end up in a post-truth continued polarization. So if the volume of facts, quote unquote, becomes so overwhelming that leaders and their followers can, in a charismatic way, sort of cherry pick and support preconceived beliefs, well, we can now deepfake our information into plausible outcomes and creative ideas. And so this fosters this post-truth environment where factual consensus on anything becomes nearly impossible when every faction claims to espouse the real facts and the loudest or the most persuasive leadership voice might win. Well, where do we end up? And I'll just invite you here to take a mental pause and go, which one of those outcomes seems to be evolving as we sit here in April of 2025, right? Okay, but so what do we do about that? Like, can't we just throw up the white flag as agencies and sort of give up thought leadership as an approach, as an idea? And I'm not about to sort of give up the fight for real information. I'm not about to give up the fight here. So, where is the future of thought leadership for us as agencies, as trusted advisors? So we have to be thought leaders, and we have to be. That is the reason that people hire us, is because we are the thought leaders in our particular practice area, whatever that various practice area might be. We have to believe that we can maintain that role and that AI ultimately can't maintain that role. Because if we don't believe that, if we don't believe that we can be the thought leader here and the trusted advisor for various reasons, well, we should just give up the agency world. Like if we think that vibe marketing is truly the future, where it's literally a single practitioner can commanding just a bunch of bots to create a differentiated brand, a differentiated story, buy all the media, figure out the SEO, facilitate the e-commerce process, well, we might just want to flip on the matrix and plug in. Or, or let's keep our mantle as the thought leader, as the trusted advisor that our clients continue to turn to and help them get better investment out of their business strategy. So what we know is that AI won't just change how decisions are made, right? It's already altering what leadership requires, what leadership means. And it was, of course, never just the access to information. It depended on the persuasion, the storytelling, the charisma, the qualities that aligned people toward that shared vision. But what happens now when we reduce the need for people to both access that information and ultimately execute the tasks? Well, we're already seeing that, right? So just because it's dumb doesn't mean people aren't making dumb decisions. We're seeing workforce reductions. We're seeing information-based roles with AI increasingly positioned as sort of the replacement for humans. And if AI agents churn out thought leadership content and carry out executive decisions, well, where does that shift happen? Where do we start inspiring and mobilizing our clients and become that trusted advisor? So whether it's basically hitting publish on some thought leadership button or making high stakes business decisions, so a lack of human challenges, what it does, of course, for everybody, it increases the risk from a single point of failure, right? Without pushback, without scrutiny, without taste, without discernment, even the best intentioned decisions from a CEO, from a CMO, basically can create those blind spots and create failure. So we could see a couple of different things happen as we start to look at sort of the future of us as that leader, right? We could become sort of the low ego, high analytical leader where AI takes over execution and we see the execution. So at that point, leadership becomes ironically less about charisma and emotion and persuasion and much more about what the bots are doing, basically wisdom, ethics, discernment, precision decision making. Now, these leaders will succeed not because they can simply captivate the room or rally a team. It's because they consistently make the sound and well-reasoned and discerned choices. I kind of call this the Rick Rubin of thought leadership, right? Rick Rubin can't play an instrument, doesn't know music at all, but basically, when asked why musicians hire him as a producer, it's because I have great taste. Right? They may have no talent at all for playing music or even understanding what the technical aspects of marketing are, but they've got amazing taste and discernment and the ability to experience and do high degrees of analysis or those complex things. Or it might lead us to a greater need for deeply human, emotional, empathic, charismatic leaders, right? So as AI renders those decisions increasingly cold and clinical and data-driven people and teams and clients, well, they may crave and gravitate toward the opposite, leaders who can make them feel something rather than think something. In other words, if it's a world drowning in data, trust in a leader's judgment and integrity may become more important than the knowledge capabilities. People might want to say, I don't want to know. I just need to believe that you are using this knowledge, this information in my best interest. Rather than what information or talent do you have that I don't, it becomes what are you going to do with that information that helps me? And think about that for a second. So on one end, you get this sort of hyperlogical, Vulcan-like leader who basically efficient and precise, but detached kind of from human emotion, right? And on the other, you might get a magnetic, big, larger than life personality who captivates and inspires, but maybe prioritize charisma over substance. But weirdly, to me anyway, both of those feel like a bit of a trap, right? So maybe the real challenge is finding something in our, at least in the short term, that kind of blends the best of both without falling into either of those extremes. And so that gets us to what might be as agencies, as leaders in our various practices, the future of relationships, right? The future of the idea of building in differentiation up for us as trusted advisors. Because the common thread for both of those two leadership ideas is trust and experience. In this new world of AI driven, where clients can answer any informational question, prompt their way to a strategy doc, ask a chatbot to rewrite the brand guidelines, trust has become the last great differentiator, and experience becomes the way to create that differentiation. And it's not just some soft, fuzzy idea, it's a business critical idea. So many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the Edelman survey, right? The trust survey that they do every year. 81% of people say that trust in a brand is a deciding factor of whether they buy. Not value, not convenience, not clever messaging, trust. And if we let that sink in, it definitely applies to us because our clients are purchasing from us. Our clients aren't just looking for someone smart. They're looking for someone that they believe in, someone who will make sense of the chaos, someone who tell them the truth when they need to hear it, who actually shows up with their best interest at heart, not just some service menu and a retainer agreement. I have seen so many agencies these days still for mid-sized companies, when they're saying, hey, we're going to set your strategy for you, they send over a checklist like, how much are you going to spend on SEO? How much are you going to spend on SEM? How much are you going to spend here on advertising? As sort of a checklist, as sort of a, a kickoff to their retainer agreement. It's like, it's just a menu of services and it's not creating trust. So here's the kicker. AI can't do that. AI can give you the fastest answer, the most statistically correct answer by chance, but it can't reassure your client. It's not going to feel the strategy when it needs to shift. It can't pick up on one very moment of doubt in that boardroom where you're sitting there, pivot the narrative on the fly, figure out the politics of the organization. No, trust is born in the moments that don't show up in any sort of marketing dashboard. But by the way, neither can we without the experience to understand if what AI creates or the automation or the bot does is actually good or not. Only experience can give us the ability to know when we should stop generating and when we should start executing. It's why when any of my clients these days are saying, well, how do I get good at AI? I say, you can't and you should stop trying. My advice is go get good at the thing you want AI to make you better at, and then you will be better at AI. So when we're trusted advisors, this experience plus trust moves us from an asymmetry of information to the value, the differentiator of us as trusted advisors, as an asymmetry of relationships. Here's what I mean by that. So when we're thinking about this, here's what we're doing. We're moving from this idea of here's what we know. In other words, this body, this corpus of information that we usually walked into the room with to say, here's what we know, the best practices, but here's basically we shift into here's how well we know you. It's about moving from expertise to true empathy with our clients. Now, how does that show up in the real world? Well, it's an extra hour that we spend understanding the client's weird internal politics. You know what I'm talking about. The weird internal politics that we pitch in the next big idea, saying we don't know yet, and then moving heaven and earth to go get the right answer or a better answer for them. Adapting our methodology, our process to match how they work, not forcing them in to conform with ours. Basically, figuring out ways to create a customer-centric, client-centric methodology instead of saying, no, we use the snake methodology and we do step one, then step two, and then step three, and then you have to do it this way because that's the way we work. Making their business goals our shared scoreboard, not just campaign KPIs of proof of life of what it is we're doing. And maybe, and this is something I've been on a rant about lately, is moving slower, creating better, more valuable things than moving faster in mediocre ways, because we have reached peak speed here. And so that's where we start being referred to not as an agency, but as a partner, as someone that can idealize and really move that relationship forward. So when that happens, and this is where I really see us being able to differentiate from a positioning standpoint, We're not going out there saying we're an AI powered agency down the street, right? We're not in the race to the bottom of the vendor comparison game of who can be more powered with AI. So start thinking about a few things. Stop delivering merely facts and start shaping what the meaning is, right? So AI generates all this information, but leadership is not going to be about more information. It's going to be about guiding interpretation. It's going to be about our taste, our advice, our thought leadership, helping these different groups contextualize and synthesize these insights in a way that create them as part of us, a part of a community of operating in a familiar and better way. It's framing it in a way that fosters that trust. Two, remember, trust in the storyteller is the foundation of the belief in the story. John Maxwell once wrote, people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision. So we can't take their people to places we haven't yet traveled ourselves. In other words, story creates value and builds trust if we do it well. But if the audience doesn't believe in who we are as people, the people in the business, the message is going to lose its impact these days. And so thinking about more interactivity, more community-driven content, more new thought leadership isn't just focusing on attention. It's basically loyalty over transactions, depth over virality, right? Basically more than simply broadcasting and all those kinds of things that we do. So it takes time. It's going to take our experience. And there is no growth hack for this, right? Our value is not in speed, but it's in wisdom. So that's where we can start to think about what we're doing as an asymmetry of having relationships. But here's the weird thing, right? Here's the weird thing, which is when we start thinking about, like, what does this mean? Because there's a paradox here, right? It would be lovely if all of our clients sort of understood all of this, right? They made decisions on this wisely, but of course they don't, right? We're seeing more and more. There's the bullshit bumper sticker going around that says AI won't take your job, but somebody using AI will, which is demonstrably untrue. But it doesn't mean that company leaders aren't actually making stupid decisions and doing this anyway. And I know I don't need to tell you, this crowd, that the last 2 years have been rough, rough, rough. I mean, smaller agencies have been getting our butt kicked a lot. And a lot of people have asked me what I chalk that up to of the last 2 years. And mostly what I do is I chalk it up to really the larger agencies. That includes the big consulting firm. By the way, they have felt this as well. And they've really begun to drunk our milkshake, right? It's just easier for companies, our clients, to call in that big firm that they have the MSA with and pull in all those people who are now claiming to be AI powered instead of taking a risk on this boutique, cool, human, leader driven agency, small with specialized skills. And this is it, right? This paradoxical twist. The demands of modern marketing, the modern strategy, have become more specialized and more expansive at the same time. Marketing professionals in jobs and us as agencies, we're now expected to have deep expertise in a niche area while maintaining a broad skill set across multiple disciplines, right? We want us, our clients these days want us both to be a specialist, a generalist, a strategist, an operator, a data analyst, and ideally a mind reader, right? They don't settle for just unicorns. What they want now is multi-class unicorn, wizard, hacker marketers. And they may see that in the bigger consulting firms, the bigger agencies. So some of you may remember what you're seeing on the screen here from a few years ago. I actually opened at an AMI meeting with this, and it's become one of my favorite ways to look at the agency world, my favorite mental models for in terms of looking at skills and positioning of us as agencies and consultancies in the world. And it's the smile curve. Now, I didn't invent the smile curve. It's been invented for a long time, but what I did was I sort of applied it to the world of agencies. And so what you see here is this nice wide U shape on a graph. It's a smile. And basically on one side, you have value, how much clients are willing to pay you for your wonderful thought leadership, your advice, your advisory. And then the y-axis is basically whether it's a time project or a process that goes on into the into others, right? And so when we look at that, it's sort of big, high-value strategy projects on the left. Then we go into vision and insight and sort of thinking and basically done over that. Then as we move toward the right, we get high-value optimization services over time, advisory, measurement, all those kinds of things. And the danger isn't on either end, it's in this middle. The middle is the danger zone. And I talked about this before when I met with the AMI crew before. And whether it's a project or a process, it's where you find yourself in the day-to-day implementation work that you do with your clients. And AI is exacerbating this to the extreme. So the execution, the stuff every agency says they do, basically the stuff that AI is learning to do faster and faster is all at that bottom of the smile, right? It's all at the bottom of that sort of executional sorts of work, right? Where we aren't stitching together multiple skills, multiple ideas to make us truly a trusted advisor with our clients. In other words, the left side is determining what problem to solve and how to solve it empathically and wonderfully with our clients. Strategic planning, creative direction, brand voice development. And the right side is that strategic ongoing support, insightful reporting, agile pivots, strategic optimization, long-term value creation. In the middle, this is the stuff that clients can now get from a freelancer, from a SaaS tool, or now from a sort of self-described prompt engineer in their basement, is the execution. And here's the harsh truth. This is what's going to happen is that the middle is working itself out, sort of getting eaten from this middle out toward those areas. So AI doesn't just write emails now, it does ad targeting and basic design and SEO optimization. Heck, it'll throw in a motivational quote if you ask nicely enough. So when we're thinking about this, how do we think about this? The hard part of this is, and this is the point that I made before in the group when I met before, is if your services with a particular client are at the bottom of the smile curve, it is almost impossible to move up the smile curve. It is really, really, really hard to convince that client that hired you to do content or creative production on an ongoing basis that you're now going to be good enough to manage their marketing strategy. But if you can position yourself as trusted advisor, build in that trusted advisor, whether it's creative, technical, thought leadership, subject matter expert, marketing expertise, marketing strategy, it is child's play to move down the smile graph. That's key. If they see us as a bunch of writers, if they see us as an agency that basically just works on transcreation of localization and translation services, we are going to get replaced, and we are going to get replaced quickly, either with an AI-powered agency or with AI itself internally. It is where we can move up and stitch together as we move up the smile curve. And hopefully what we're doing is moving down the smile curve is actually part of the way that we will differentiate, because AI, it is the combination of those things, the unique combination that we bring as part of our trusted relationship with the community of clients that we are creating. It is all about that. And so it is anchoring where we basically can't be copied. So what we're doing here is anchoring our value to a place where it can't easily be copied at the edges, because the AI won't sit in the meeting with your client and call out the thing the client isn't seeing. It won't predict which brand move is going to spark maybe a cultural movement, because that one thing almost worked and we got it there, and it's going to get ratioed on X, or it's going to figure out this way to do it over here. It's not going to decode the weird internal tension of the politics between Mary and Sue and the client and basically be able to fix that relationship internally with a single call to the right person. It's not going to be able to combine the amazing writing to understand which brand value is most emotionally compelling. All of this is around skill sets and capabilities of your quote unquote full service agency, the strategic advisory, the strategy of the relationship of a community that you're building to shape meaning into parts of what it is you're doing. And that is what's going to future-proof our agency versus those that basically say, we'll be more efficient using all of this kind of stuff. And so it's this dual path, basically getting, yes, more data-driven, more analytical precision. Yes, being able to read the numbers like Spock, but more importantly, the emotional stuff that we want to basically have a foot in both. The emotional ability to create communities, the ability for us to bring analytical precision to that and use the tools. Now, does that mean that we don't use AI? No, of course not. We use AI. We use calculators, we use Photoshop, we use innumerable tools to scale our human teams to do interesting things. But saying we're an AI powered agency is not the flex we think it is. It is just isn't. It's not the flex that at all. Basically, everybody is going to be doing that. And all it's telling the customer is don't trust us because we're using AI to basically cheat as a cheat code. So lean in, automate the stuff, use AI, use the tool, use AI to get signal faster, to get basically done things done faster. But it's time to take it off the front page of our website. It's time to basically do the things that create relationships with our clients and basically differentiations from us going forward. And I'll just wrap with this, which is basically when we want something, when we want to basically create that value with our clients, it is all in the way that we make them feel. We make them feel seen, we make them feel heard, and we're helping them make better decisions. And that's the kind of thing that an AI powered agency, AI powered tool isn't going to actually do. Building trust and creating the best of our client relationships. It is about building community, building the community to basically build in something that starts to create a stitched together idea of our clients, our audiences, and ourselves in the marketplace for how we're going to build value in the future. It is all about authenticity in basically being more and more human. And so thinking about that, what I want you to think about as you position yourselves for the future and you start thinking about what it looks like basically tomorrow, next year, next month, whatever is as you're changing your marketing message, something that I have just, it's worked for me for years and years and years is market where we're going, not where we are. In other words, start talking about this in a way that starts to build in what that relationship looks like in your particular lens, whether it's search, whether it's combining strategic advice with creativity, whether it's technical implementation and technology, helping, how do we position ourselves to really help our clients really get to that next level beyond what AI can provide? I think it's the most exciting time in marketing right now because knowledge isn't the game anymore. Knowledge is everywhere. Everybody knows everything now. We have to assume that. Trust is the soft skills. Trust and relationships will become the best of our competitive edge. It's the filter that basically will remove everything except what is truly meaningful from the relationships we have with our clients, no matter what it is you do. And with that, I'll basically love to just sort of turn it over for questions, talk, have a discussion. Shadley, yeah, let's bring it back.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Before we open up to the Q&A, I just want to remind everybody that the BABA Summit is coming up in 5 weeks. So if you don't have your tickets yet, we would love to see you there. And with that, and if you need more information on the summit, you can find it at agencymanagementinstitute.com. And with that, we will open it up to questions. We have a smaller group, so if you want to unmute and ask your question, you can, or you can drop it in the chat room and we'll see about getting it answered. Like I said, when we were starting, I find this subject fascinating and I found my head kind of spinning a little bit with a lot of what you were talking about. It is definitely the trust piece is fascinating. I hadn't thought about that perspective of it being like, really, what can AI never do? Like, what will AI never be able to do? And that's generate trust.
Yeah.
Even AI itself right now, you have to sometimes double check. Like some of the projects I've been working on, I put prompts and things in. I'm like, I'm not sure that's even true. And then it'll come back, no, I fictionalized that because I was interpreting what you wanted. So the trust piece is obviously.
It's actually absolutely a key thing, right? Which is this idea of trust. It's a critical aspect of how we're going to differentiate because the inevitable is the inevitable, right? You know, it's like there's that wonderful. It's not Clayton Christensen didn't say it, but it's always attributed to him, which is you may hate gravity, but gravity doesn't care, and that's where we are with AI and the inevitability of it, sort of starting to take over executional things, but what it can't do is and I guess I got to always put in yet there, but what it can't do is replace because AI is really the first technology that I can remember anyway, certainly any technology in the business stack that requires trust. In other words, if you know, and this is I always encourage this as an exercise. If you say to AI, go create me the first draft of a great ad, or go create the first draft of a great blog post, and then it dutifully does so based on your prompt, and then you come back and go, that's not very good, can you create something better? It'll say, oh yes, of course I'll create something better. And then you go, no, that's not, I don't like that one either, go create something new. And it'll do that ad nauseum forever, right? It'll just keep going, it'll just keep going and going and going and just recombining words forever.
Right.
And it will never come back to you and go, hey, listen, stupid, the second one was the best one, you should use that one, right?
Yeah.
That level of ability for us to recognize what good looks like is how AI will be effective. It's knowing when to stop, right? It's knowing when to say, that's helpful, that's good, that looks interesting. And
Right.
that ability is really critical, because when we start talking to our clients, they're in that world, right? They're doing that already. I've got clients already that are sending me, well, I went to ChatGPT and I did this, and here's what it told me. And I'm like, yes, but it's telling you a bunch of shit. It's that what it's telling you is exactly wrong. But
Mm.
only we have the ability to do that, but only we have the ability to do that if we actually can actually recognize what good really does look like. And that's a critical part. That's where our experience comes in with the trust.
Right. Hi, Bruce. I see you turned off. Oh, a couple of you have turned on your microphones, so feel free to let me know what you're thinking. Bruce, I saw you first, so if you have a question,
Okay.
go ahead.
Trust is one of these things that seems to be more dynamic than ever.
Mm.
My wife was convinced that Matt Damon and Tom Cruise were starring in a remake of a film that was made in the 60s. I forget what the name of it was. And because the search engines have allowed AI responses to actually take over the stuff we used to fight so hard for to get to the top of the poll, um, I'm noticing that just our audiences have become more skeptical of what they actually can believe, and certainly, the current dynamics in Washington and whatnot is not helping that. Um, so I guess the question is, and there's other studies out there that Drew has shared, Yankelovich or the Trust Barometer. Um, I'm really baffled on how to build trust with someone we may not ever get a chance to meet anymore, and we can be refuted so readily um, by all of this fake news that's out there. So if we're digital marketers, how do we get over that edge of trust that seems to
Yeah.
be eroding?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I'll answer that there are two lenses that I typically look through on this. There's a third lens, which is more cultural in nature, but it's definitely for us for different beverages, right? We should get a good bottle of whiskey and talk about that. But from a marketing standpoint, from an agency standpoint, from us as trusted people, there are two lenses that I typically look at that. One is sort of the idea of, so trust is our relationship with the uncertainty, and that's not my quote. There's some great Rachel Botsman, by the way. If you haven't read any Rachel Botsman on the concept of trust, is a great person to read. She's done some amazing work in this space. But it's basically trust is a relationship, right? It's a relationship with uncertainty, and the more trust is required based on the level of uncertainty or the damage done by the uncertainty. In other words, I need to trust you more if I'm going to fall backward onto a bed of nails versus if I'm going to fall backward onto a bunch of, squishy balls or pillows, right? So the level of trust with the uncertainty of the outcome is what needs for trust. So depending on what it is we do for a living for a client means there are different levels of trust that are going to be required. Handling somebody's strategy is going to be a higher level of trust than fixing somebody's, ad creative on an A/B test. So as you move up the smile graph, there's going to be higher degrees of trust. So that's one way to start to look at it is we have to be the trusted source of interesting things for further up the smile graph in order to develop meaningful relationships with clients. The second lens there is then when you look at, okay, the people. to your point, we are losing trust in the institutions. We are losing trust in major media. We are losing trust in our government. We are losing trust in nonprofits, even. We're losing trust even in business and brands. But where we're not necessarily losing trust, or at least losing it less readily, is in people, is in the individuals. So that's why you're seeing a lot of trends these days around surfacing the employee, surfacing your leadership, surfacing the idea of influencers into the space where people become the brand. And there's a whole zero-click marketing aspect of this as well. But it's how do we surface the meaningful people to create the things that you're trusting that represent our brand rather than sort of the brand itself. And so what does that mean? It means personifying your thought leadership out in the marketplace a lot more. So you as the agency owner, or you as the creative team in the agency, or it's basically that, no longer blog post authored by admin or by the brand name. It's trust and content and thought leadership and meaning created by the people within that create the brand and the helpfulness around that. You see what I'm saying there?
We got to be more human than ever, which was one of your points early on.
Indeed. I think that's
yeah.
that's the place where we can carve a niche, right? Is being more human and more prevalent with our humanity than ever before, because ultimately, as AI, in many ways dehumanizes the decision-making process, it creates a scarcity, which of course increases value of the human process.
Robert, I have a question. So I was talking to a friend of mine who is a doctor 5 years ago, and they had a training done that each doctor has to go on Google and ask question as a patient and see what Google answered that, because they were facing question from the patients like, hey, I search on Google and this is the answer I got, right? Where I am seeing a trend in my company also, when I'm going to a client and client is telling me, hey, I went to ChatGPT and generate some content, right? Now, if you don't know how to use AI, and again, this is where I have people, like for me, it is easy because I have agent running from day one on LinkedIn and other things. I have about 10, 12 agents, right? But the problem is some of the people in my company, they're not comfortable. They will never be. They do not adopt. So when they go on a call, the trust is not there because they cannot defend the way, or they cannot explain the way, which is, hey, I have done it, instead of like, oh, don't trust AI. And that's where people come to me and say, the client, right? Hey, Shahid, you told me such a way, but your team members are just telling me not to trust AI. So unless you use the tool, just like the doctor's incident, how do you see that transition? How do we train our team member to adopt AI so they can provide a better solution and answer? Because I know that yesterday's OpenAI news is an eye-opener. I don't know whether you guys know it. OpenAI admitted yesterday on that release of 4.1 that instruction you provide to AI, only 39% of the time it follows the instruction. They just increase it to 51%. Because I always knew it, like every time you give an AI question, it gives you a different result, right? So my question again around team members. So I just want to know your opinion. How do you see that? Sorry, I took my time to ask.
Yeah. So what we have to remember is generative AI as it exists today, and this basically means in both the reasoning as well as the generative, just general generative models that create things, create chats, basically create content, textual-based, image-based content. The thing that we have to remember is that it is creating the most probable answer to your particular prompt. So the words that follow are the most probable. Now, there's a difference there because what we typically see is the pushback is don't trust AI because it's the most average of answers. And that's not true. It's not the most average of answer. It's the most probable. So depending on your prompt and depending on the time and depending on the context and depending on the model, you might get something quite insightful. You might also get something that's completely wrong factually. You might also get something that is in the middle, right? So we have to be, it is a recognition of what good looks like that is important there, because depending on what it is you get, it's the whole, I call this the Dunning-Kruger problem of AI, which is basically, in other words, the less skilled we are at the thing that we're trying to be skilled at, the more powerful AI is going to look to us, because the most probable will typically mean something that, ooh, looks better than I could do. And so we have to be able to recognize that. So it's less about telling our clients to not trust it, but it's basically, how can they know what good looks like if they're not an expert and have experience in the thing? That's where our experience and wisdom and ability to have had experiences with what good actually does look like in a particular thing is a differentiator, because we can tell, yes, client, go use ChatGPT, but don't make any decisions about it. Let's talk about it. Let's collaborate on it. Let's meaningful. Let's create a relationship and a community where we discuss what's being discussed, so that I can help you understand what good looks like, what excellence looks like, what smart looks like, because I'm an expert in this. That's why getting to be an expert in the thing that we need to be experts about is so important. If we need to be great using AI with writing, we need to be a great writer. If we're going to be great with analytics and data, we need to be great with analytics and data, so that we're not trusting AI to produce a good answer. We never count on it to produce a good answer. What we do is we count on it to provide the most probable answer, which helps us get to our more meaningful answer in a faster, better way.
Thank you.
Jeff, I think you had a question. Jeff Soto. Hi.
Hello. Oh, actually, I, I think Robert touched on it. And, I think, that complexity of where does AI go, and ushering the client through that trusted advisory. I think for us, it's leaning on Nearbound, right? And Robert was leaning into the employer branding side of having your agency leaders or your people speak to things. But, we're finding that as we more source and discuss with our clients, we're providing that information that is AI cannot produce, right? It can look at what a general person does, but case studies get us back to that thought leadership. And really, the AIOs are thirsty for that, right? I mean, I think, we're up against a lot of bad information out there, and, SEOs running around with their hair on fire. But if we stick with the things Robert said, I mean, it was so refreshing to hear you say that. So I really, it was more of just thanking you, sir, for actually bringing these things out. And, it always feels good when you feel like you're on the right path and someone, verifies that a little bit with their own experiences.
It's the path I'm on. I'm not sure it's the right one.
But I mean, I guarantee it's working for you and your clients, right? It is working.
It is working for me and my clients, for sure.
They want to pick up the phone and call you. If they could have Robert Rose GPT, they would have that, right? They don't.
Exactly.
That's the thing. Right. Like, I think trying to dissuade people from contacting you or supplying them electronic information doesn't build the bridge of trust. And being able to answer, right. I'll answer that phone sometimes at 8 p.m. because my client's losing sleep on the East Coast at 11 p.m. It's easier for me to give them that 5 minutes and say, Bob, it's going to be okay. Here's why. Let's do this and attack it this way, leaning on some of those past experiences you said. Like, we know what we've tried, how close we got it, and where we can take it to the next level. AI is always just going to give you those generalities, and that's where we win 100% of the time, by being able to pick up the phone.
Such a great point. Yes, that's exactly said much better than I said it, basically.
Well, thank you, sir, for your insights.
Yeah.
Awesome. We got about 9 minutes left. Does anybody else have a question? Hi, Eileen.
Hi, I've got one. So I've really appreciated, the way you've structured all of the thinking and everything. So that's really wonderful that those of us who've been leaders for so long, we're really, really good at knowing what's good in our different areas. But as we're bringing on new hires, what kind of strategies have you come up with to get them there quickly so that they're valuable as well?
It's a great point. And what I have been doing with both clients and with anybody that I work with is, and it's going to sound a little bit like old man yelling at clouds. But I absolutely earnestly believe this, which is the thing that is missing, I believe, is with this new hires, new employees, new marketers that are coming in to new jobs, typically going to be younger, is there's no knowledge or experience or appreciation for the fundamentals of what it is that makes us good at whatever it is we're good at. Creative design, user experience, marketing, strategy, business, whatever our agency provides. And more, the younger and sort of less experienced are, and I can see this happening on social media. I see it happening all over the place where basically using a prompt and some deep fake images and stuff like that, they come back and say, there's this wonderful new thing called, I was just writing about this the other day where I was having a conversation with a CRO at a young technical agency, and they're a SaaS-based technology. And the CRO said, we're going to fire our entire marketing team and we're going to replace it with a growth hacking or growth marketing team. And I said, oh, well, that's really interesting. Well, tell me what this growth marketing team is going to do. He went on to explain marketing, basically. Just different, a focus on new top of the funnel marketing rather than sort of mid funnel lead identification and lead nurturing. Right? And I said, okay, great. You're basically replacing it with a marketing team. And so it is this idea that many of the younger people will delegate the friction of knowing something to the ChatGPT or to AI that will be the ultimate downfall. In other words, if we don't learn how to do the thing, I use the example all the time. When I first started in business, 35 years ago now, one of my first jobs at a media company was to go through all of the reports that came out from the different areas, of the business and basically read through them, categorize them, basically be able to summarize them, do book reports on them and all that kind of stuff. It took me a month to go through basically the quarter end reports from all the different groups. Now, the thing is, that's something that AI could handle in a few minutes now. I could just say, go give me a summary of all this stuff and then send it out to everybody. But the thing is, what it did was it made me really good in understanding the business. Like I understood every nook and cranny of that business. And that experience helps me recognize what the value is. So I think more than anything with new employees, it's making them go through the friction of understanding the thing at a deep, wise level so that they know what good looks like and that the tools are actually productive for what they're trying to do.
And that's actually a slow, more hands-on mentoring process that we all went through back in the dark ages before computers.
Totally. Or even with computers, but it's just basically we have foundationally wrapped ourselves around this idea of speed over the last 20 years. And it is now, we are at peak speed, right? There's this whole move fast and break things mentality that has been having in marketing. By the way, marketing teams as well as agencies, move fast, break things, move fast, break things, move fast, break things. And now what most marketing teams do, most of our clients are doing, are young professionals pushing buttons, trying to fix all the things that they've broken over the last 10 years. And we're not getting anywhere. We're not getting anywhere new because we're too busy fixing broken things. And instead, just taking the time, taking the friction to slow down a bit and ask, should we be doing this? Will we be doing this in 5 years? Is this the best use of our time? What is the true meaning of what we're trying to do here from a brand, from an emotion, from an analytics, from a measurement perspective? Slowing down and getting more friction into our teams and more wisdom into our teams, I think is the differentiating way of the future. I really do.
Fantastic. Great questions here at the end. We got about 4 minutes left. If there's anybody else that wants to raise their hand or jump in. If not, I will say thank you very much, Robert. It's been fantastic. It was very insightful. It's a lot for me to process and wrap my head around. I'm actually doing a lot of work right now around the concept of slowing down. So it's interesting to hear it in this way. I thought it was fantastic.
Go watch the interview with the head of creative design. It's a 60 minutes interview. You can find it on YouTube. He's the creative designer for the Birkin bag.
Okay.
And he is asked specifically and talks specifically around how industry has gotten wrapped around the axle of speed as a value creation function. And he talks about their purposeful resistance against that. It's fascinating interview. I loved it.
You said it's on 60 Minutes?
Yeah, so if you go to 60 Minutes, or if you go on YouTube and search for 60 Minutes Birkin bag creator slow or something, you'll Google foo it or YouTube foo it enough to get there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Oh, it looks like a couple people found it for us already.
Yeah, it's great. It's really, really good.
Erica, thank you very much for jumping on
thank
that.
you.
If anyone else wants to grab it, it's there in the chat room, that conversation. One final shout out for the BABA Summit coming up in a few weeks, like 5 weeks from now. We'll all be hanging out in Denver, so we'd love to see as many of you there as possible. In the meantime, everyone have a fantastic day, week, month, year. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another one. I'm sorry I don't have ready who's going to be on. If you check Drew's newsletter, it will be out on tomorrow. So you'll know who to come hang out with 2 weeks from now. Again, Robert, thank you very much. It's been fantastic, very insightful, very helpful. I think that it's a lot of takeaways.
Thanks so much.
So thank you very much. And I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody.